And so, oh, there we go. But I could imagine doing a cut rate version of the Vision Pro or something like that. But Steve would probably try that at some level. We've got to get it this cheap or something like that. You're muted,
You
Froda,
are
or you're
not muted, but silent.
silent.
So
Yes,
you don't have a mute button, but we didn't hear anything.
which means
Got
it's at
somebody
the
else
computer
to
level.
go to the doctor for me, so I can be here for a
Yep.
little while.
Microphone.
Fantastic, Jamie.
There you are. I can sort of hear you.
Yeah, now you can hear me probably much better. Jamie, I am so glad you're here. We've got to check on those timings. I just have to go into the other room to get a coffee. I picked up Edgar from school and timing is a bit bad. Please give me 20 seconds. So
Okay.
sorry, guys. 20 seconds. And I should probably mute myself while I do coffee noises.
Jamie, how do you like the Super Note?
I hmm.
Would you recommend getting one, or is there another device that you would have
Well,
gotten now had you known?
I spent a long, long time looking at reviews online, and there were some things I liked in the description of the remarkable, but I didn't like the business model at all. I don't like software as service. I didn't feel comfortable with it. The Supernote, it's good so far. I'm still really getting used to it. I like that the pen never runs out. I don't have to. I used to have a Sony tablet, and every 2 weeks or so I'd have to replace the pen tip. This one never runs out. Never. I've had a bit of trouble linking it to a keyboard, but they solved that. Tech support solved that for me. Um, I'd do it again, but I still can't write a full review. The one thing the Remarkable had that I really liked was lots and lots of templates. And the Super Note has lots of templates too, and you can import your own, but it seems to be very particular how you exact size that you make them before you can import them. So I haven't imported any. And
By the way, can you hear me
I
now,
had
guys?
trouble turning it sideways and using it in landscape. I know that.
Okay. You can hear me, yes?
Yes, we can. Well,
Okay, good. Please continue, Jamie, what you were talking about. I just want to make sure that it's all set up.
How much
uh,
more time do you have, Jamie?
I've got I've got about an hour now
Oh, okay.
because the somebody else is taking the kid to the doctor,
Oh,
and I
oh,
don't have to
okay.
chair Senate for till 2.5 hours, I think. So
All
I
right,
should be
good.
okay.
So you can redo your talk where it's actually recorded, and we'll leave out the parts that you didn't want to have shared.
Yeah, I guess I could do that. Oh, yes, yes, I know those parts. I was thinking
Because
it was
Frodo
that one
records
slide I
everything in
hadn't finished
flat.
making, but yes.
Frodo records everything and puts it all up on YouTube.
Uh, and I make songs out of it.
And you make sense. Yes.
I'm not kidding. I find it a really different way to have reviews. So yes, there are actual songs being made. Jamie, so you and me both have presentations. How long is yours? Mine is quite short.
I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Let's say 10. You told me 10, so
Do you want to be first or second? Because after that, we
I
go
can
into
go
discussion.
first.
Hmm?
I'm just going over an old paper or two, well, two papers really, and just really the take-home points.
I think it would be really good if you, yeah, if you go first.
Okay, sure. So I think it's this one I want.
And I got quite a few messages from people who can't be here today, which is, it is what it is, as they say. So we can, yeah, we can start.
Mhm. Okay. No. Okay, so this is research that was conducted many years ago. field study of annotation. So first of all, obviously, we know why annotation matters. It's moving beyond mere access to text, text under glass, as Nelson said, to a critical engagement with text. The idea of the palimpsest, that you have a text and or you have a text and you have something on top of it, something that can be changed, a sort of engagement with it. And if I could my notes, it might be better. Oh, okay. So how do we translate from common practice to the needs? And my main interest was in the needs. I'm only going to do some of the slides because you could read the full paper if you ask me, I can share the full paper with you. There's a fuller version than what was published. So back then people were mostly working with paper, so I took paper, gave it to students to prepare for a seminar in two different universities over the course of 6 years. We combined all the results, did an analysis of it, looked for some made sure the coding was the same, and so on. So to begin with, the essential components of classical evaluation, usability evaluation, are knowing what makes your users, your people special. What is it that distinguishes them from other people? So who are the users? Why are they doing whatever they're doing? Is it a task they've been assigned, or is it a goal they have, which is something they choose to do? Either way, the reasons, the why, and then of course, what is it that's being evaluated? We also consider this within a context, but I'm not going to talk about context today, and context isn't something that is necessarily specified. In the case of this study, we were talking about students, graduate and undergraduate students in computer science, electronic commerce, library and information studies, and literature, all of them studying hypertext. Their task was to prepare for discussion in a seminar in a class with other students and a teacher. And the tool were paper-based scholarly texts. So we took chapters and articles like you see in the bottom right here and put them on large pages, two regular pages side by side into one of these large pages. They're North American sizes, so they're ledger pages, which are two letter size pages. There were wide margins in most cases, so there was lots of room for writing and reading. Issues of cognitive overhead are very important when we talk about screens, even paper. I won't go into the differences right now. What did we find the users did? Well, some of them highlighted, some of them underlined, some of them wrote little asterisks, as you can see in the bottom one there, over somatic. But they did more than that. They wrote words. They highlighted entire sections, like in this bottom left here, which is a Darwinian method. Darwin and his grandfather, both big annotators, both very frequent, especially the grandfather, very big with drawing these long lines to mark off an entire passage. Some of the marks here, like where do I start reading this? This is from an early version where I didn't cut out the first sentence fragment um, because I didn't want to feel I was influencing the students, but realized later I should have because leaving it there did influence them. And so they're making notes about what they're doing. Where do I start this reading? And here's where I started. And over here, the middle right one, uh, extending the asterisk on somatic, saying this is what somatic means. The one on the bottom right, it seems the student has translated some of the words into their native language. Other students worked out solutions to problems. There was a counterexample I included in one of the texts of a simple math problem. If two people are riding bicycles towards each other 20 miles apart and there's an insect traveling back and forth between them, how much distance will the insect travel by the time they hit, assuming that the bicycles are traveling at this speed and that speed and so on. And we found there were many different types of annotation people make: vertical lines, underlining, shapes, colors, words, diagrams, and so on. And we classified them this way as arrows and asterisks and boxes and brackets and circles and highlighting in color, and incidental marks, text and underlining, and anything that was at least two of these together. So the most common on its own was highlighting, but there was quite a lot of compound. And in almost all the compounds, there was text included. From this, we developed a taxonomy of the categories of marks and their purposes. We described them as casual or meaningful. Uh, we structured them by levels of integration into Bloom's original taxonomy. This was done a long time ago. I don't think we had access to the new taxonomy at the time. And we classified them really as at the gross level, three things: explicit things, written words; telegraphic, non-text, that is just pointing out where something is; compounds, more than one. We found major differences by participant, by types of marks, by category, by use. And in the five people that we were able to definitively say they actually did it in more than one document, we found also very strong differences. Uh, Interpretive markings and place marking notes. So the conclusions we made is there are clear differences between users. There's a clear difference between the types of marks and the purposes, but also there are many instantiations of the same type of mark, many instantiations of highlighting or drawing arrows or writing text, and many variations within the types, which were mostly idiosyncratic by user. So one user would do it one way, another user would do it another way. But we found there were only six purposes for this type of user preparing for a seminar. And these types were interpretive, engaging with the text, synthesizing ideas from the text and beyond it, what I would call making the text their own, working through problems, an example in the text, verifying a problem, maybe a note about what a chart means, tracing progress, drawing connections in the text. When they refer to variation in vocabulary, that means the same thing as another part of the text where they say different words for the same purposes. Perhaps barely engaging, marking long blocks, procedural directions to the reader. Come back to this part later. What does this word mean? Place marking and aid to memory. And Kathy Marshall found this also a lot in her studies in Microsoft, that people would mark something down when they paused to answer the phone. Or she would ask them, what does this mark mean that you made in this document? Said, I don't remember, but I know it was important at the time. And we needed a miscellaneous category. We didn't have many, but we did have things that we would just call incidental. So we thought we would need to go back to first principles to see the way forward. Text has to be part of any annotation tool because users use text to record explicitly what they mean. Not necessarily full sentences or paragraphs, but words, perhaps these days emojis, but I'm not sure. So readers have to make sense, have to annotate to make sense, to bring two things together or more, to synthesize ideas, possibly to mark their presence. And so annotation, I see it as technology to support thinking through writing. Um, and in the old Japanese idiom sense, Freud can tell me if this is still accurate. I have to drive a nail into it. Um, so how should we make this available to users? Should they be using electronic styli? Should they be typing with a keyboard? Should they be drawing? Is the process important or only the result? What can we determine from casual marks that people make? And also, one of the questions is, do people do this in multiple passes? Do they change their annotations, having made them once, in maybe in multiple sessions, maybe in one session? Is there a generation gap in the way people are doing this? And then I want to go back to an earlier study about, I've got to move this. There's a bar you can't see that's blocking my, not that one. This, no, I will find it. Okay, I'm in the wrong part. Going to the table of contents. An earlier paper I wrote about how glossaries can be seen as a form of annotation. So I wrote this hypothetical thing a long time ago, not really knowing what political science was, but imagining a hypothetical Bob um, reading newspaper articles about, oh, I don't know, the IRA during the Troubles, or as one of somebody else in the present, somebody else in Future of Text today said, I think it was Tom, what about um, the American War of Independence and how British newspapers would have referred to George Washington and the others as opposed to people in the what were then the colonies referring to them. Uh, so on the one hand, we see the same people referred to as freedom fighters, but on the other hand, they could be referred to as guerrilla warriors, patriots, miscreants, whatever terms you want. Freedom fighter. So Bob might note that these two terms are for the same kind of people, so we want to compare them. The CF, for the compare. And then the more colorless or neutral term militant maybe could be used. And what does freedom fighter denote? Noble but pitiable underdog, somehow a sympathetic figure. A guerrilla warrior, cowardly, perhaps savage, despicable, an enemy. And from this, Bob may even extract the notion of rhetorical code words here, where a rhetorical, which would be another category. I'm going to see if section 2 is the one I wanted. This is old because when this was first made, the CSS would make these the same size. Um, no, sorry, it's not. I also referred at this time to when this was written, the Elian Gonzalez was in the news quite a bit in the United States and Cuba. A child brought over to the United States by one parent who perished in the travels, and many American politicians said that with parental rights are so important, the child should only go back if the other parent came from Cuba to bring the child back. And once the parent, the other, was in the United States, they of course wouldn't want to leave to go back to Cuba. And when they found that the other parent did want to go back to Cuba, then they said, no, 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 Elian Gonzalez can't be allowed to leave. As well, there was the whole issue of the photograph of American military or police personnel uh, taking the child out of the closet and where the rifle was. And some people said, look, the rifle is threatening the child. And other people said, well, clearly it's not pointed at the child. It's not a threat, but interpreting things the way they wanted, spinning things similar to rhetorical code words. Not knowing how much time I have, I'm going to jump to the other part. Glossaries is a distinguished type of annotation. Okay, thought it was there. Glossary types, there we are. So I also want to talk briefly about, in this paper, I threw together 4 dimensions of types of glossaries that I thought would be helpful for discussion. Is a glossary tied to one document? Is it annotation in one document, or maybe a series of documents that are somehow together? Or is it floating? Is it like a Victorian commonplace book where you make your notes in your notepad or your notebook and you use it across all documents? Its classification by the user. Is it meant for that person to use or a small group collaborating, or is it for anybody? And Marshall and Brush Brush is the way I'm told she pronounces her name, um, found that graduate students in some seminars were very reluctant to share their annotations with anybody else because they were afraid, apparently, of being judged. And I've anecdotally known some professors who uh, as students and now professors, will only annotate once they've finished everything they want to say and they've written it somewhere else, and then they will copy it into the shared item because they are afraid or of not appearing as wise as they are. Whereas other people have no such compunction. Classification by author type. Is it published? Is it meant to be authoritative? But still could be modified maybe, or is it unpublished, something that maybe is never intended to be published, or is still in draft form? And by level of interactivity, is it something that's static, meant not to be changed, or is like the fixed text and then people can add the palimpsest layer to it? Or is it text which is meant to be, I don't like this term, living document, but in a sense, a living document that is available for constant updating. And I think that is all I had to say. Let me just go back to my PowerPoint in case there was more. No, that's it. So, key points I want to make. Text is essential. A lot of research in annotation has been about the technology, about what we can record with data, what the RDF should be, or what tools we should be providing for users. And I think we need to go back to first principles to why do people do it? And once we know why people do it and what they need it for, then we can start to do it properly. And I've lost track of where I said. I'll find out what people need to do and help them do it. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm very happy to participate for as long as I can in the rest today.
Thank you very much. That was phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that was, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. So to hear you, obviously I know your paper, explain it like this with all this. I mean, it is criminal that there's 5 people here, but at least it's recorded, and at least these are the 5 passionate people at the moment of this. So
I trust the
again,
people who
thank
will
you.
watch the recording have very good reasons for not being here live.
Yeah, well, Jonathan is driving to his home in the countryside where there's a power break and etc. I'm sure there are some other questions or comments. Then I'll do a brief presentation, then we'll continue the larger discussion. I hope that's cool with everyone.
Fine with me.
Yeah. So, Jamie, I'm fascinated by annotation in part because I have been uh, so apprehensive. Well, readings, as presented in university sort of syllabus, tend to be, a bunch of um, low low importance, like low intrinsic importance documents that are there for the purposes of annotation. One of the reasons why you get photocopies is so you can mark them up, although not everybody sort of makes that connection. And the sense in which they could just read it from a book is it just sort of leads to some kind of frustration and resentment at having to pay the ticket price on the photocopies. But in general, like with books, I know some people write in them, but I do not, and I'm very curious about what kind of framing you have done or have had to do in one or more of these sort of presentations, sort of studies, in order to sort of level the playing field in terms of people's baseline of what to do with text. I mean, you are telling them to annotate, I guess. Like,
I
what
start off
what
by
yeah.
showing them we in one class we did an exercise. Well, in the one class I told them you should read this. You can annotate if you want. I recommend annotation, but I'm not making
Mhm.
you do it. In fact, I think one person in the actual study didn't annotate at all. They just wrote their name so I would know which document was theirs. In the other class, I we started with where I was trying to teach annotation as a technique. We start off with a paper. I don't remember which one it was that was I had annotated in part, and oh, I think I know which one it was. There's American Scientist magazine had an article about a statistical problem that led to a whole bunch of publications by somebody, and they were all based on bad statistics, but it was very um, provocative subject. Do beautiful people have um, children with XY chromosomes or double X chromosomes? And but it was statistically deeply flawed. And then they also made another statistical error. Anyway, so this article I annotate, in Acrobat, and I hand it out to the students with color notes, and I ask them, what does this word mean and what does that word mean, which they would have had to have looked, well, almost certainly had to have looked up, and encouraging them very much to annotate. And then we go on to this exercise. The second class at the other university, they only got one article, and I just recommended they annotate, but I didn't require it. I annotate in books sometimes, but not much, and usually with post-its that can be removed. I was very happy many years ago to get the clear post-its with a colored tab on the side, so I can annotate and still see which page it's on. And most of my annotations are cross references when I actually write in a book. I'm just going to turn off the sound because it's just bad news. Um, and most of them are cross references, and I write inside the flyleaf or something. I have been known to actually photocopy whole chapters and then write on the photocopy. But now that this was, I've been doing this for 25 years now, maybe a little longer. Yeah, longer than that. So now that I have digital paper, I do it on digital copies. But when I was doing my master's, I had two copies of most of my papers because I would have one for noting and one for when I needed to copy it for other people to read. And there was a study, well, I think the study may have been superseded, but there was a study that suggested strongly that students, when they get copies of the professor's papers that have been annotated, even if the professor says, I didn't make these marks, this is the only copy I could get, or this is my supervisor's copy from 50 years ago, and ignore the marks, they were wrong. Students still take those annotations very strongly and are reluctant to have other ideas. Now, I think that paper and that result has been superseded, but there seems to be an influence of pre-annotated things on readers, which is why I try to give my students only clean copies. And yes, I find that students will not buy textbooks anymore. So I am going to make my graduate class. I'm teaching a combined graduate undergraduate class in, I think, September, and I'm going to make the graduates buy a textbook, but not the undergrad. Actually, it's about experimentation and human-computer interaction. So they'll both buy a, a very detailed guide about how to do it, not really academic. And the graduates who have not taken undergraduate training will get a book about human-computer interaction, user interface design, something like that. And if they don't, they're just going to do badly in the course, and because they won't know the material. That's it.
Sounds
So
reasonable.
did you say there'll be provided guidance on how to annotate, or just that
Yes,
there will be?
for this class, also because the graduates have to, all of my classes, the graduates have to give at least one presentation because I, I don't really see the point in graduate classes. I'm teaching Canada, and I think the British system where students are writing a thesis and they do whatever they need to learn enough for the thesis is the right way to go. So I say my students, all students have to do a presentation to defend whatever their final graduate work is, whether it's a thesis or what we call a project. So they have to get practice in classes doing presentations, and mine have to write a term paper, which is slightly different if they're doing a project than if they're doing a research thesis. And I say to them, you will do presentations, you will be reading articles to comment on them. All the undergraduates will have to read the articles to have questions, and their questions and their summaries will be graded. And so I teach everybody using that statistics article again, how I annotate. And I lead them through that one because it's about experimental design, which is a big part of the course. I might Maybe I'll give them one of the other articles to read also, because there are definitely vocabulary words in there that they won't that most of them won't know, and asking them in class what it means and showing them they should have looked it up will, I think, encourage them. I have to be careful. I can be scary in class too, and I don't want
Definitely
to.
believe that.
It's
Um,
counterproductive to the students, and I don't want to do that.
I
yeah.
think, yeah, no, Brandel, go on.
I was also curious, Jamie, if you have in the course of conducting this study or elsewhere encountered any more extreme behavior. You know, I think a lot about the sheer violence of Burroughs' cut up and other folks who have actually done a genuine cut copy paste. You know, it's always fascinating to hear Ted Nelson talk about his time as a paste boy in the New York Times when he was actually sort of manning the paste pots in order to allow people to relay out entire pieces of type text. Have you encountered any sort of annotation or sort of sense making activities that are related to even greater sort of document destruction as well? Or
I haven't. I did it to make some of these documents.
Mhm.
Um, I had to choose which paragraphs to use. I printed off definitions of some terms and made them into irregular shapes, glue onto the page, and then photocopy them. Um, but I haven't seen my students doing it. I think one of them may have actually ripped up one of the pages at one point. They were out of frustration. I know that I provide them stapled in the upper left corner, and I'm careful to do it in such a way that they can um, turn them over and still and see the correct pages. And some of them have been afraid to undo the staple because the professor gave it to them, I think, which I say, as long as you don't lose the page, you can do that. I mean, I know it's not easy to reproduce this because it's on ledger paper. In some cases, they're in color copies. Um, but no, I haven't noticed anybody. And I did go to a number of universities around the time that I presented this paper. I was on sabbatical and I went and I didn't see anybody talking about cutting things up. I did see lots of markup where people had things they were reviewing, grants and articles. Some of them were covered in red ink, making it hard to read the original. Um, it could still be read, but it was difficult. Um, but nothing with cut up. And obviously when we talk about hypertext, Oulipo is never far from our minds. So it reminds me of who? Why do I think it was Foucault? Who it wasn't Foucault. Somebody did that thing where they cut up lines and glued them onto a page and then read them as a poem. Um,
I mean that's Burroughs, William Burroughs' poetic
that is
technique
Burroughs.
is, yeah.
Okay.
I think he's not alone in it, but he was the most famous of the Beat generation doing that in the like 50s.
Yeah. Oh, and William Gibson writes in Mona Lisa Overdrive about somebody with a hand photocopier scanning pages of books that he likes and gluing them into a notebook. And when I was a child, there used to be television ads for some religious group going through Bibles and Korans and so on and taking the passages that they liked and making their own religious text out of them. And they were cutting, I think. And as a child, it disturbed me greatly. But the photocopying, much, much less so.
Yeah, I think about it in the context of it's cool to hear that Gibson writes about it there, but yeah, like the pre-modern commonplace book is a really interesting sort of fixture there.
Hmm.
And I'm also just reading through a compendium that Anne Blair and some other folks called Information: A Short History, that sort of is yeah, a bunch of different things that people do with information, and the process of copying versus the process of cutting and pasting or otherwise sort of transcoding. And it's interesting to think about what sort of psychic and cognitive barriers sort of apply as somebody sort of countenances being as kind of vicious with a document as that. So yeah, it's so I'm curious about the way in which the sort of people have to be is abused of the concern over the integrity of the document and what kind of signifiers you can kind of deploy. Like you said, like it's on loosely photocopied paper. You've been told that whether the presence or absence of previous annotations have a positive impact on their propensity to do anything like that. I think those are really interesting as we sort of go into trying to create affordances in whatever kind of form, be it like tangible or others, to help encourage people to uh, uh, know how to do it. And it sounds like you have explicit tutelage there, but also like what that they should do it because I think that there are a number of different sort of acculturated base points for whether to do that or absolutely not, because you'll get
Yes.
smacked by your teacher.
Oh, I remember very well now. I was in grade 3 and I had to do something about Iceland. And my grandparents and my uncle both got me the exact same hardcover book and said, just cut the pictures out and glue them into your essay. And I said, no, 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 I couldn't because it'd be destroying the book. And besides, what if I want something on both that's on both sides of a page of a leaf? And they said, oh, it's okay. You've got 2 copies. You can have one for each. And I wouldn't do it. And now I would have much less hesitation. The other thing is that I I want to I like that we're using these old terms because I think they're we can learn from the way they were used in the past. Commonplace book, palimpsest, and one of the I mean, paper has wonderful advantages, but the electronic, you always have a clean copy. You always have that base layer to go back to. And this is why I wanted to do stuff with electronic paper for so long that, but I'm not hardware oriented. I'm not an engineer in any sense and can't really do that. I don't do that work, but something that coming out of my PhD, my research was mainly focused on how can we make electronic hypertext more like paper so we don't lose the advantages of the electronic, but we gain the advantages of the paper. And of course, at the conference, we talk about this constantly. You know, you can't take a laptop into a bathtub more than once, but you can, but the worst that happens to your copies in New Yorker is the ink runs. You can get another copy. Yeah.
Tom, I see your eagerness there too.
Yeah, speaking, it's just total aside here. My copy of Geek Spearing Gifts from Ted Nelson, I bought it used, but you can see it is marked to hell. It's unreadable from the previous owner.
Oh, that
This is one of
reminds
them
me.
where it's,
I actually have a book at my office that's what is it? It might be Jane Eyre or something. I think it's a German translation. Um,
mhm.
every single page is marked up, and what they did was they went to libraries and they copied a page from each library that someone had marked up and put them
Oh,
together. So each page is different.
yeah.
And there's that book, Humument, which you may have seen.
Hmm.
Um, actually, I'll put it in the chat because I think
It,
that's how it's spelled. It's it's a book, and the artist, and they do multiple. They do over the years. They release a new one, a new one. They draw on the page, making the letters part of their picture, part of the picture, and each page, or sometimes each spread, is completely different artwork.
yeah. Well, that was kind of an aside. I just wanted to show you where
Oh,
the
no.
annotations can get a little bit out of hand because it can. I mean, I find it pretty much unreadable in its current form. I've been
Oh,
tempted to get another
sorry.
copy.
Was it used? Were the annotations yours, or did you buy it
No,
back?
no, I bought the used. I bought it as a used book, and it was just so annotated. It was practically unreadable. So,
Mhm.
anyway, so I did want to address a point you made a little earlier about the students following along annotations, pre-existing annotations, even if they aren't yours. Couple of thoughts and observations on that. One thing might find as an interesting little study that you could do is, Kindle has on it, frequently highlighted portions of books or stuff like that, and you don't know who's done it, right? It's just it's wisdom of the crowd or whatever you want to call it, that this is the point everybody seems to fixate on, which may be totally off the mark, but it would be interesting to see whether not knowing who made the annotation actually has an effect on it. Um, any annotation is a power move. And one of the things that I think runs into difficulties with students is that they feel like they're trying to guess what you think should be important at a certain level. Looking at it from a social scientist perspective, you're sort of messing up the because of your relationship with the students, and I'm not an IRB here, but because of your relationship with the students, they're going to follow you. And my students always want to know what I want. They don't want to think for themselves. They just want to do what I want them to, so they'll get a good grade because they think that's how they get a good grade, right? Is by aping me. One of the things that I think is really part of my pedagogical practice now is to turn that around into much more of a reflection mode where they somehow have to relate it back to a project they're working on or their own personal experience or something like that. And this is also a way to AI proof it, so to speak, because the AI is not going to know what their personal experience is, unless they somehow can communicate that to the AI. And that brings the human back into the conversation. But more importantly, it gives value to what they think and you can sort of see their thinking in their connections back to it's more than an annotation, it's a connection back to where they are. And in the context of our project, this could be an interesting way of thinking about it in the sense that how do you make it both yours and but also be able to see the community and to flip back and forth in such a way that allows you to see your annotations or your thoughts about the subject, but then compare them to say what Frodo wrote about the subject or what Brandel or whoever wrote about the subject. That would be a really interesting, but you'd have to do it in such a way that it didn't look like any of us were preaching to the reader. The idea is to elevate the reader and give them agency in their own reading as opposed to following the crowd. And so I think that's something to think about it. And I think reflection's a good way around that. It's not perfect, but it at least gives their own thoughts a certain level of value that I think just simply annotating things doesn't necessarily do. Because now you're just guessing. Oh, this is what Jamie thinks is the most important thing in this document that Engelbart wrote. And I want to figure out what that is because it's going to be on the test,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
So yeah, just thinking out loud there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frodo.
Yeah, good points. Now, just briefly, because of this nonsense microphone, 1, 2, 3.
Or 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is better, the earlier or the later?
The first.
The first one.
That is so annoying.
Yeah, you were perfectly fine there, and then you went quiet again.
It's these guys. Well, this is supposed to be better. Anyway, I'll do some research on my own time. Okay.
It's not an Apple lapel mic. That's the problem.
That is the problem. So hang on, I have to close the text window here. Following on for that, and I'm so grateful for the context here. A few slides on, and as usual, there's no intention of you guys reading all of this, but also coming straight out of what you were just talking about, to me, it's very exciting to think of annotations as knowledge objects in their own right, so that you are actively building a structure of the knowledge yourself. I think, Tom, that goes to what you were saying there very much, right? So a brief on the terminology, whether we agree or not, at least we'll know what we agree or disagree on. So a document is a bunch of stuff. A note is a little thing. An annotation is a little thing about something. And marginalia can have, marginalia and annotations are in many cases overlapping. For our purposes, I don't think it matters. And also relates to citation, quote, and transclusion. So, of course, I talked to my good friend Claude. I went through this. And Claude kind of made the point that when it's digital, like we're talking about now, the distinction doesn't really matter that much. So what I'm talking about, at least, is stuff that someone has written in response to something else, not in a new form necessarily, right? So as a provocation, I think it's fair to say that you can look at academic papers as a collection of annotations. There's more to it, but if you screw it up a little bit, right? So I did this one because this is kind of poetically what I'm talking about. I mean, it's a bit poetic. I mean, pathetic. I did it on the tube on the way to see you guys, but these things should be able to be lifted off their original substrate to become whatever constellation you want. That's really what I'm thinking
sharing
of.
something with us, Frode? I might need to find a different Zoom window.
Oh,
I
I
see
am.
it now. It's okay. I got it.
Okay, I'll show you my silly animation then. So this is emotionally what I'm thinking about. The annotations in whatever form and whatever thing, you should be able to lift them and do things with them. That's really the thrust of what I'm talking about here. So the work that Dini and I did over the last 2 years, a lot of it referenced annotations. So I changed a few things, and I think it's quite relevant. And here is a particularly brilliant paper that I don't know if you've ever seen before. I mean, other than, the last half an hour. The way it is right now is very simple. Highlight, and then you choose what kind of highlight you want. And then you can choose later to view only those kinds of highlights. Here they are. If you go to another, you can add in, the language we're using currently is you can add an annotation, meaning this is a thing you've written about that document. You can add many notes, but only one annotation. Not the best language. I don't think it's good terminology, but the point is, it's like you wrote at the back of the PDF, so to speak, right? So you can also have help to have keywords, but that's there. And then, as I said, adding a note, that becomes basically marginalia. Not very well presented, but that's the way it is, right? So that's fun. And as you go through a document, you can choose to highlight different things for different reasons. One of the interesting things I find now, particularly with the recent discussion, is I'm reading this book, Behave, that Andrea has basically forced me to read, and I'm very grateful. There's a lot in there that's that's new for me, little definitions that aren't necessarily the same as a dictionary or Wikipedia. So it's kind of a glossary. I'd like a better mechanism to lift that out of the book. So this part of the brain is that, and with this text, so I can build on it further, because here you see these are all of them shown up together. So of course we can easily talk about, once these are lifted from their substrate, that can be shared. I also would like to be able to read your guys's annotations, especially to papers that are relevant in our field. And this is what I wrote while I was listening to you, Jamie. I'm talking about annotating not just paper, virtual paper. I'm talking about annotating places, people, time, not just papers and books, because this month is also about conferences. Theoretically, it should be possible to be in a conference session and annotate the session. So then we need to know what we mean by that and how to address it. Is it time? Is it room? Is it topic? Is it title? That becomes kind of interesting. So this is my 51-second perspective on this. Once you have annotations as knowledge objects along with all the other knowledge objects, it can be very, very overwhelming. So even if you take it into XR, the actual spatiality of it can help a little bit. But what's really, really cool, and I think most of you have seen aspects of this, is when you're reading something of interest, and you go into focus mode by doing this, everything else goes away, which is really, really important if you're going through all the annotations that are quotes or interesting of papers you've read that term. It's going to be a lot. So you're going to need to be able to really, really reduce the visual complexity of the space. So the way that I'm experimenting with this myself is really quite messy. And that is why, and I think I've brought it up a bit before, context as context or with context becomes really important. I saw, Jamie, one of your slides, you chose not to show context right yet. But what I mean by context in this context is sometimes the annotation objects are the thing you are working on. Sometimes they are a bit of a background for something else you're working on. So by annotation objects, they can be things like all the important stuff, any actual quotes you've brought out or whatever, you're working with that kind of material. Now, the context can be exactly the same, but it's stuff you already know. So it is kind of your canon on the shelf, but it also can have other aspects to it. For instance, with the experimenting I'm doing with our meetings, you guys are canon. I've written about who you are. I don't need to redefine who you are every time or have anything else do it, right? So then we get down to context and annotation object management. And on the website, I've been working on a kind of a format for this. I've been recommended the W3C annotation format, which is partly relevant. But I do think that this is something, in another session, not today, but something that we as a community should just decide on, whether it's something in JSON or RSS or BibTeX or whatever it is. I think it's getting really, really important to be able to share these easily with each other. One of the key things when I've been discussing it with my partner, Claude, is that some of the standards are very internet heavy, meaning it's based on having a connection. The work that I'm doing is very document heavy. So once we get into the implementation of annotation infrastructures where we think of annotations as objects, we need to politically with ourselves decide on these things. And that's what I had to say on that. Oh, I see comments on the margin here, which is relevant. That's quite fun. I have your Zoom things on the side, like a marginalia.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about different kinds of use cases here. And Jamie, I'm so extremely grateful for your relevant and hard work that you've done on this, because annotating to understand the text, to share it with a group, etc. These are very, very different things.
Yes.
Right? So how we choose to think of them is going to be interesting.
I think the context is really important. It's more complicated than what you're doing, but what you're doing is a good start. I mean, we can't wait till, like with so many things, we can't wait till we have it all worked out and then implement it. One thing I'd want to know is, in your annotation, can an annotation have multiple tags on it? Can it be in multiple categories? And can users make their own? Because I've often, the few times that I've tried to make something annotated perfectly for my students, I find that as I choose colors, I'm partway through and I realize I did something in the wrong color, or I want something to be in two. I can imagine it, stuff I annotate myself, it being in two, and sometimes wanting to split a category and make it into two categories. But that's not hard once you got the technology going to do that kind of thing. We do it again and again.
I was just looking up one of the capabilities there. The thing is, I've been experimenting with using LLMs to make massive glossaries of each one of our meetings just for fun. Generally, it's completely useless because I was in the meeting, so I remember what happened. But I have a few specific drop-down categories, person, place, blah, blah, obvious things like that. And of course, with annotation, you have other things like agree, disagree, and so on. But generally, as long as you have a thing, a term, and then a definition, I think a lot of it can just be free form in the definition. So when talking about changing the granularity or categorization of stuff, it probably should be free floating. I mean, quite flexible. What do you think, Jamie?
That's a start for sure. And I'm certain there are going to be some people who will be overwhelmed by options and think that if they're going to use it, they have to get it right, and they don't want to. I mean, like I use colored tags for my file system on the Mac, and I'm very frustrated that I'm only allowed so many colors. It's much better in the email, where I haven't hit a limit yet. Um, but yeah, you can always start with something freeform that's searchable, and then people generate their own. I mean, that's part of how hashtags came about.
True.
That yeah, what do they used to call them? User assigned descriptors, UADs. Um, it's the same thing. Um, oh, I had something more to say. No, if it's important, it'll come back to me. Oh, well, that's it. I was talking earlier about how I started using a Supernote e-ink tablet. One of the reasons I got it is it has this feature which I think some other things have, like Remarkable, that you can highlight certain text and then say make this a heading or make this a title, and then it's indexed and it appears differently visually. You can also highlight sections and assign keywords to them. The keywords are assigned with a keyboard. They don't show up in the body of the document visually, but you can find them again more easily when you're doing some sort of search. And you can also draw a star, a five-pointed star, and it will note that as an important section and that shows up visually as well, without saying why it's important. And there's a trade-off between multiple factors. Um, the exact mark I want to make, a star or something, a five-pointed star or something else. But it's easy and exactly where I place it and how much information I want to include with it. With the star, all I can say is this is important, but it's more than just my typing a dot or doing a little swirly circle. It's something that takes a little bit of practice to get it so that the pad recognizes it every time as the five-pointed star. And then I can find the important sections more quickly. And I very much like the keyword, although, as always, you're typing it, and so it's fixed with exact words. And earlier, I think before the recording, I was talking about the difference between variation in vocabulary and different words for the same concepts. That semantically, they're identical, but a basic IR system can't distinguish them.
Yeah, that's interesting. In parallel, in the chat here, I was reading Polanyi's Meaning again, and there was a great introduction to one of the chapters. We live in the meanings we are able to discern. And I feel that with annotations, it relates to that because we come across something that either has known meaning and we just keep reading, we don't annotate it, or something that is new meaning for us within our current mental schema, or something that is disturbing. So it's almost like we're placing little anchors to say, this is how the world relates to me. As in, I'm trying to navigate and expand my knowledge space. What in the world is this? Or this is so cool, it reinforces my perspective, right? So I'm wondering, Jamie, when you're talking about the different levels of descriptors, of saying this is super important, or this is dumb, or this is 5 stars or 1 star, all of that I think is really important. And then you pointed out it should be customized to different kinds of people. by itself saying this might also just that be useful.
Mm-hmm. I think at a minimum, I think it would be very helpful just to be able to highlight the this part, and then it's a the text is its own text. Another layer of palimpsest on top of it is writing why this matters, what's important, what the reference is, maybe even what the context was.
When you talk about context again, so as I mentioned earlier, I've started making music based on our work because text is great because you read it at your own speed and you can scan. Audio, someone just speaking, you kind of lose that. And watching TV, to go back, it's actually, even with the Apple remote, it's a little hard to go back and all of that, right? Music goes further because there's other stuff happening. So you kind of have to, if you either ignore the lyrics as a normal song, or if you actually want to hear them, it takes a bit of different effort. Plus, the writing of musical lyrics rather than descriptive text is different. So I find it's been really, really interesting, some of the more poetic angles that come up, including on this. I've written 2 songs now with AI help, seriously modified on many levels back and forth, on how annotations can take, leave the room and come together. And I think we can do something amazing here. I mean, not hypothetical, hypothesis and other web annotation tools are really cool, but they are kind of confined to that. If we can find the means to annotate a PDF, a Word document, the web, in a simple way, similar in simplicity to BibTeX for a document, that can then be shared, and we have some level of addressability in it, I think could be really, really amazing. The theme this month is a conference in XR. So I could think it would be so amazing. I mean, Douglas Adams, I had one meeting with him, and he talked about what he called virtual graffiti, where I write this in this room right now, and it stays here. You have to be here to read it, right? Which is neat, but extending it to this kind of annotation, people in a conference room writing stuff, it's accessible, but not just there, it's accessible as knowledge object. So many years later, when you've left that session, you can go back into that virtual space, and these things can have some kind of relationship. Would be amazing. Randall, please.
When we kind of talk about the sort of the structure of annotation, or the sort of the legitimacy of a certain number of colors, or certain sort of stock provisions that ought to be sort of accompanying things, I do feel like those are relevant sort of things to kind of haggle over, but they're all ultimately downstream of any given praxis, and that there are going to be mutually exclusive components that people want to have as part of what they do. And agreeing on the praxis of what you do or what you mean by it is sort of the first part, and then the like whether something can be bolded or whether things are sort of off to the side. One of the challenges that I find is that a lot of the times in, for example, word processing, but then into the second order sort of navigation of editing and annotation and haggling over text, is that people aren't really cognizant of the fact that there are such a legion of qualitative decisions that have gone into the specific praxis that people have chosen, and that the people who are kind of used to them just think that they are objective. It sort of reminds me of the way that Chomsky's super wrong about grammar, and that like he thinks it exists and it just doesn't. It's just that it's easier for us if language sort of lands in a certain way, but that's not an inevitability. That's sort of the concerted effort of a number of people to try to jam something into something sensible. But things can be not sensible longer than you can stay solvent, to paraphrase Keynes. Like the processes and the practices that people use to do things don't have to be good, but they are. What they are is what they are. And yeah, so any kind of assessment of what something ought to have or what something is is really much more of a negotiated fact. And I don't know if I have a point here other than the process is the thing that sets it in place rather than it being sort of legitimized for its own sake. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I have a provocation for you, dear Brandel. As the model element guy, in this context, could you think of a model element as a unit of knowledge, not a unit of shape?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've mentioned before, a model is supposed to be like a JPEG. It's supposed to be a single entity that is atomic in the sense that you can't kind of reach into it particularly. The thing that I'm proposing next, and I've said it publicly in the past, is to have a spatial figure, and the idea that you can have an AirPods case or some other kind of excellent sort of thing, and then you would be able to have like a separate model that you would be able to arrange and kind of move around. And then you'd be able to put text and relate it to either the airport or the case and have sort of subordinate linkages using CSS anchoring relationships. So to the extent that that a model element per se can represent knowledge, it's really only the fact of this versus that. Sorry, the only thing I have around me is I'm surrounded by Apple stuff. There's a bird. I've got a bird. Um, so so those things can be, but they don't really define. There aren't any characteristics about them other than that this is this. What I think comes next is in the concept of spatial CSS is to be able to relate those things, and the semantics will be to do with its orientational and positional semantics rather than like this is like that in the sense that these are both made by the same company. But one would be able to convey those things through those kind of presentational attributes. Hopefully that makes sense.
If you had to, could you have a model element that had minimal or no visual characteristics, only a term and a definition? Could that be shoehorned, or would that be horrible?
Um, I have some model elements that possess only spatial positions that relate things to other things. They don't render, but they do have, like, if you were to attach things to the pieces in it. So you could have, like, imagine all of the points on a geodesic. You can have a model that is just those points, and then it itself has no sort of visual significance or meaning, but you can use that as a scaffold on which to orient and construct sort of a constellation of things. And likewise, you could take that same thing and then just use a cube or some kind of hierarchical tree and use that to sort of dynamically update the constraints and the relationships between entities. So yes, hopefully that sort of satisfies that. But because within the context of the web, it's only being there for the user to see. I'm not sure if there are other ways in which we could construct meaning for non-renderable models.
So then I have a question for everybody. Having had this discussion and this fun, do we share a passion around the notion of different kinds of ways to annotate? By annotate, obviously you all know, but for my specific meaning, saying something about something else on it, to be able to have that lifted into its own environment. So you can aggregate your annotations about papers, books, places, people, whatever it might be, in a manner that you can spatially interact with it and share with others. I think it's absolutely crucially important. So I'll let you think about it for a minute.
Since someone has their hand up, let me jump in on that. So, an annotation is the same as the textual excerpts, which we might be placing in the environment as well. I mean, it's just a different source of information. It's jazz riffing off of other person's jazz. But then again, an original text is doing that too, because you have footnotes, you have, if it's a place, if it's a text that refers back to other texts, which most text, hard text is what I'd call these days, would do that. They're all doing the same thing. It's just that an annotation is a much smaller thought than what you would have in the book. But if you're excerpting pieces of the book, those are thoughts too, right? So those are ideas that are, and should they have an equal weight? Because I've read something that the author didn't read, that amplifies what the author is saying or undermines what the author is saying. Does that have equal value as what the author took the time to put on a dead tree? Yes.
On that, Tom, just in terms of our language, the difference between a note and an annotation in this view, they're identical, except the annotation points to a specific kind of place of origin, but everything else should really be the same. Like if you put a yellow sticky on a page, or if you put it on a desk, it's still a yellow sticky, right? In terms of value, the source document or thing should probably be immutable, but your relationship with it has meaning to you and if you share it with others. So that's definitely something to be. Yeah, Brandel, thanks. I see your message. Jamie, Peter, do you have thoughts on that?
The part about note and annotation, yes, I agree absolutely. But I was just typing that I have to get ready for my next meeting, so I'm gonna have to go.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much, Jamie. It's always
Well,
good
thank
to
you
see
all.
you.
It was great, and I took notes, electronic, mostly cut and pasted into Apple Notes. This is very good. I want to keep working on this. Very exciting. We did have a workshop on hypertext on annotation at hypertext 1 year. Maybe we should do it again.
Absolutely something to think about. And any given Monday, we're here, Jamie, as you know.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Love your
Thank
presentation
you.
before.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Peter. Thank you
See you
all. It was
later.
very helpful to meet
Thank you.
you.
Interesting
Bye.
stuff. Yes. Brilliant.
Bye. So then, Peter and Brandel, the notion of annotations being okay. So the hardest thing that I'm dealing with now intellectually, it's not like a horrible thing, is explaining the potential value of working in spatial with things here, there, and everywhere, right? And what I'm really having to settle on, not necessarily the one key use case is helping someone learn relationships, which of course is obvious, right? So in the 2D map in Author, you can say Brandel, and then you can say Apple, and you can say Vision, you can start drawing lines. All of that is straightforward. I think XR can go further with that. And I think that a key issue is of why people don't work in headsets more is how do you get the data in there? I've been doing all kinds of workflows for different kinds of data, because if you're in there and it's just its own playground, it doesn't relate to your work, right? So I'm thinking if everything we read and want to, a little note here and there, and Tom, just to reiterate, free floating notes should also be part of this environment, no question, like micro documents. Doesn't it seem like it could be extremely valuable? I mean, if you read a paper book and you do some underlines, you then hold the paper book up to your headset, which, depending on permissions, can see that page, find the document, and then take those things and extract them as well, right? Technically, this is a piece of pie. There is a function in Author already that does that. If you take a picture and you have it on Photos and you put it in, it says, oh, it's from this book. What level of excitement do you have to have these annotations available? Peter?
Yeah, I'm sort of envisioning a set of combinators to build up the annotations. Um, Maybe instead of having just like the whole cloud of entities, we could sort of collapse them into a set of tables, and then we could have floating combinators off to one side, and you could select the table by touching it, then touch the combinator, and then touch another element. Basically, sort of like have a visual vocabulary for building up queries that would reduce that huge cloud to what we're actually searching for to drill down. So at first you might have all the authors, then you could have, or say all the books. You might be interested in annotations about books written by organizations that were researching annotations. So books, organizations, and annotations would be entity concepts corresponding to tables, and about written by researching would be combinators that we could use to build up queries to narrow and focus down and tease out what we're going for.
That's interesting, Peter. But one thing, you started using a headset a little bit every once in a while, right?
Yep.
I think how we use the language around this and how we use the headsets is fascinating because for most of Sloan work, it was designed to be on a chair that could spin. So you were inside a volume like this. Once you get up and walk into the space, it becomes something different yet again. So you're talking about queries and so on, Peter. It's really interesting to see a similarity of what you're saying, but more spatially. So like you choose to have certain things in the background, certain things coming in that way, certain new information and so on, that you can almost touch and feel rather than ask for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I'm almost like picturing, maybe in the new Meta home environment, anchoring a table of authors on one surface, then anchoring on another wall the table of books, and then having some sort of a floating query selector. And I always picture these for these combinatorial kinds of things, the dial home device from the Stargate saga, where you'd be touching elements. You might touch a given element more than once, and it's the sequence that you touch them in that controls the formation of the complex query.
I'm just looking up. I don't know what you're talking about, so I'm going to look at it on YouTube and share it with you guys because that sounds fascinating. So any one of these videos look best? I guess one of the top three?
Actually,
Which
the
one?
fourth down showing the guy touching the panel. Yeah, that's it. That's illustrating the idea.
Right, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, the premise in Stargate, at least, is that you are describing a location in three-dimensional space by referencing different constellations. So the sequence that you reference them in is describing the navigational path through the Stargate network to get to where you're going. And that's why I see that as being analogous to building up the combinators for narrowing down a vast data space to highlight elements of interest.
Yeah, okay. So
That's an interesting idea.
yeah, Peter, it really is. So let me try to relate it back and forth because currently, because Vision OS is a very young OS, I have to, you see this little tiny bar underneath the bigger bar here, right? So that's the Vision OS standard grab bar. Every app has to have one of these. But so I've been working a lot on what kind of commands to have on top of this. But from what you're saying, Peter, it would be very exciting to have those, but also more active components in the space. Because currently, I can choose that bar down there, like with a menu, and then say show only this or only that. But if you could have many elements in the space that define what should be in the space, that's kind of fascinating. Because
Yes,
narrowing it down.
if I was linearizing it to go on that bar, maybe the left side of the bar could be categories, books, authors, organizations, and the right side of the bar could be the names of combinators.
What kind of combinators? Do you have some
Well,
suggestions? Just
researching, writing, basically verbs. They're describing how one category would be related to another category, concerning, criticizing, um, sort of like your boiled down link types from everyone's favorite doctoral dissertation on typed link systems.
hmm.
So basically think Triggs categories to the right and then categories of things to the left. And the other thing I might do would be now let's say instead of just having a flat level of categories, you could have a hierarchy of them. So in that case, touching and holding organizations might then cause that to expand and be replaced by government organizations, government, industry, and education as three subcategories. So pressing and holding one top level category would move you down one level, and it could all be in that bottom bar just by basically either expanding by pushing stuff out to the sides if it was a scrollable part of the bar, or replacing it. And and then of course you have to have a back one. And what sort of got me taking this approach was using Better Touch tool with the touch bar on the Mac, because it allows you to have one menu trigger the replacement of the buttons on the bar with another set of buttons, and you can actually build hierarchical sequences of buttons all for the touch bar using that approach. So that would
That's
certainly translate into Apple's control bar in VR.
Yeah, that's what we have on the author control bar. Depending on what you're doing, the options change. And designing that is absolute nightmare, but it's more fun than anything else in the world. I'm going to show you something of that in a second. But Tom, can you please talk what you were
So
writing there?
final thought. So basically, the categories would be noun classes, and the combinators would be verbs.
So
Very
one
cool.
thing that tends to have a lot of say in this is the UI design for games. I mean, and I'm not, unfortunately, a huge gamer, especially when it comes to RPGs or first-person shooters or whatever. But just doing a little research, having that interface is extremely important, but also the customization of it. And according to Gemini, at least, World of Warcraft has arguably the best and most flexible UI for the user. So might be something worth looking at. Because it's as I say, it's kind of, a sextant for knowledge, but that's basically what you're doing is you're orienting yourself within the environment. A map is about two things. Map is about figuring out where you're going, but it also has to you have to be able to figure out where you are. And so, and people start in different places when it comes to different, information environments. I've already read the first 50 books in this genre. Now I want to see what's in the 51st book, or I'm just getting into this, so I need to know which book to read first, and so on and so forth. And these are all different approaches to that kind of environment. And so the idea of having an interface for the expert versus an interface for the novice and things like that in any information environment that's customizable, that I can say, okay, I don't need this anymore. I'm going to take this off. I've got, I want to, I need the advanced tools. I don't need the training wheels anymore. But that there's a learning curve in the interface itself. I don't know how flexible that bar is in the Vision OS in terms of not so much from your perspective as a developer, but from the perspective of a user. Can they turn things on and off themselves in a way or do you control it all? They cannot. Okay.
I'm the boss. I control everything because it is a controlled experiment.
Yes.
And also there are limitations of, lots of things. But when you talk about a sextant of knowledge, I find it very, very provocative, because also when you say you're navigating yourself in the information, that's what I was told when I did my master's. That's what my work reflected. I was like, that's a neat sentence. I would like it to be much more like what we've been doing for the last 2 years, right? Where you have option, like the hand menu, you touch things. That's not a stupid idea. I would like the ring menu we looked at. I would like that too. It's just a matter of cost and what the OS allows you to do. Whether in WebXR you can do more, but you got to do it from scratch, that kind of things. So more interesting options, I would think, is direct manipulation to the nth degree. Like you select one of these things, and of course you can move it, but if you twist it, you see a different angle of it, right?
Yeah.
All these things. Right now it's a bit hands off. You can't. These are allowed. This can mean something. This can mean something, but there isn't that much. We have to be careful. I want to use when we're working with Sloan, I wanted us to invent gestures. Now I have to live within Apple's ecosystem, otherwise it's confusing for the user. But then still, the
Yeah,
notion
but
of a sextant, of having different instrumentation, so you don't just click on a stupid, pardon my phrase, stupid little bar, but to be able to set an instrument. I think Peter and Tom, both of you are saying exciting things that relate. Like, here's the thing, like, what's it called? The Prime, the sci-fi thing we've all been watching.
Prime Directive.
No, the multiple futures one. It's just been on Apple TV. Really good sci-fi. Come on, guys.
Prime Radiant.
No.
Give me a little
Prime
more
Radiant. Prime
context.
Radiant. You know,
Prime
that
Radiant.
little
Okay.
shape, right? So
Foundation.
foundation. Thank you. Right. So in a sense, it's a little stupid thing, right? But it's
Yeah.
evocative. So you use the word sextant for knowledge. And one thing I really like is the idea of having different tools for different purposes in XR as well, for different levels of uses. I mean, to be able to go in and get your hands dirty is really, really important, but that shouldn't be for the novice user. And this comes all the way back to talking about annotations, because it's fun to talk about the interactions, but with what?
Yeah.
Right? Some of it's got to be stuff that I read last week. Some of it's got to be a note I just wrote down now. So, yeah, I'm very grateful for this dialogue.
So I would say that it's a little different in an information environment. So, with a sextant on the high sea, I kind of care whether I sail into the silly rocks. But in an information environment, I may want to sail into the silly rocks because I'm not going to die as a result, right? And so um, it works to a degree, but you also have to recognize in an information environment, you can be far more have a far more risky environment and also much more customizable because you cannot, as Scotty likes to say, you cannot break the laws of physics. Well, in an information environment, you can. And the other thing I would say, as far as your limitations right now with what you can do within it, I know Brandel can't necessarily tell us what the future holds. He may not know this far out, but there's a certain amount of we need to skate to where the puck's going to be rather than where it is.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, I like to think that one of the reasons that Brandel is here is because we throw curveballs at him and make him think differently about the stuff he's developing or his teams are developing. And so, that's something to think about. Maybe that's something we need, in other
Yeah.
words, that
Oh,
people are able to adapt their control surfaces in a much more flexible way.
the whole point of these dialogues is not to live where we are. It is indeed to see where the puck can be in the future and maybe
Yeah.
even direct where it should go, 100%. So, when I bring up what I'm actually building, that is to spawn discussion rather than this is the way, because this is the way is absolutely horrendous. We can't afford that
Right.
as
I
an
mean, you
entity.
got to think, put yourself back in 1980 and what you thought was possible with a computer in 1980 versus 2000 versus 2010 or whatever.
1984, Tom, there were no real computers before 1984.
Yes, there were.
Well,
Called an Apple II Plus. Even had the right logo on it.
yeah, I had one, and that was, I don't know what that was. But yeah, we will move forward with these discussions. And as I said in the email that you may have not had a chance to read yet, if you have specific ideas for themes for the next meetings, for the next months, please tell me. There doesn't seem to be that much pull on the conference idea, so that's why it's now a use case for annotations. Annotation seems to be a bit more meaty, but please do suggest.
Are we going to stick with British daylight savings time then? So we'll be
Okay.
meeting an hour later for the next 3 weeks, according
Is
to
that
us
is that
Yanks.
what?
Yeah, that's why everybody was here an hour early, or at least those of us in North America were here early
Uh,
because the United States and the Canadians changed over last weekend.
We've already sprung forward.
that's a question because no, I can't do an hour earlier. I'm afraid.
No, Yeah, it would be an hour earlier for you, and so yeah.
We could
Yeah,
do an hour
Okay, well,
later.
yeah, it's fine. Just be aware that we need to make clear that for the next 3 weeks we're meeting at um, the hour off for North American listeners.
I'm just updating our website. So now I know why Jamie was
Hmm.
early. Okay, well, good. All right, thank you guys. And I had a side conversation with Mark Anderson earlier about social media and so on, and he's very much of the RSS is good, blogs are good. So that backs up your question, Tom. Tom, Peter, you guys do use RSS feeds, right? Okay, well, that's the problem, isn't it?
In
That
relationship to podcasting, yes, I don't use them as a going concern. It depends on what I'm doing. When it comes to following news, I guess is the Apple News
but
RSS feed? It's pretty close to it.
I'm thinking more about how we will share information with each
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
We had Slack for a while. We don't have Slack anymore. And Blue Sky is fine. X is not that brilliant, but it exists. All of these different things. We need to decide what suits. And maybe we need to develop some kind of an RSS system in our community.
Well,
yeah.
I do most of my social posts on X. I have LinkedIn too, but I really haven't been posting anything on that platform.
And
Yeah.
my problem is I'm too antisocial for social media, but B, is that I have so many information flows. It's just really hard to decide which ones I need to pay attention to. I'm just keeping up with email alone is a challenge, and I don't go on to Blue Sky as much as I probably should.
Yeah.
Although I do tend, if I do find that if I go there, I tend to get angry because people post all sorts of political things, which make me where it's not. And I don't go to X for the same reason, but Blue Sky at least is a little more sympathetic to my rationalist viewpoints. But yeah, it's just there's so many different threads. I got somebody else a couple weeks ago I met who wanted me wants me to use this voice text thing, which I find a little difficult. What's it called? Carbon Voice, where you record, and I was like, it's just another channel I have to follow.
Yeah. No, I agree.
That's the trouble. There are too
So
many places to look now.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. We have an atomized environment. When everybody was on Twitter, made things a little more straightforward, but yeah, nobody's on the same platforms anymore. I don't know. Maybe do a survey. What do you use?
We will. And
Yeah.
thank you for today. I'm going to have to drop off now and
Yep.
see you same time as today next week.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
so 1 hour later in the East Coast US.
Yes, please.
Correctamundo. Yeah. Which I think isn't a problem for. Yeah, I may have to bug out a little early because I do have a 2 o'clock class here. So, but
Fair
other than
enough.
that, I'm fine.
Oh,
Okay.
and
Okay. Thanks.
one final little AI note. Grok has been really doing an amazing job at surfacing dissertations for me. If you ask for a dissertation on the topic, it'll actually drill right down to the final PDF instead of hitting you with the top levels of fluff that you have to dig through yourself.
Right.
So just explicitly tell it you're looking for dissertations, and then it does a great job on that.
I've
Thank
had
you very.
pretty good luck
Thank
with
you.
Gemini on that front too. So,
Okay. Cool.
anyway,
Thank you, guys. Bye for now.
thanks, guys.
Okay, have a good week.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
bye.